We will deal with this later. You are still needed. That is what my boss said at exactly 9:10 in the morning after reading my resignation email for less than 10 seconds. He did not ask why I was leaving. He did not ask what it would take for me to stay. He did not even look surprised. He just slid the printed email across the table like it was a meeting agenda and moved on. I remember the time because I was already watching the clock when he picked it up. Something about the way the room felt that morning told me this was not going to go the way it should. Glass walls, quiet air, human resources sitting 2 seats down pretending to take notes. My name is Julian Vance. I am 50 years old, and I had just spent the last 15 years building the company core logistics system. The same system they were about to talk about like I was not sitting there. The boss, Richard Caldwell, leaned back in his leather executive chair, hands folded meticulously over his designer suit, and said, "Let us focus on the rollout this week." Just like that. No pause, no acknowledgement, no conversation. He started assigning tasks, deadlines, priorities. My name kept coming up over and over again. Julian will oversee the final integration. Julian will coordinate with the client team. Julian, I need daily updates starting tonight. It was like my resignation did not exist. I sat there listening, keeping my face entirely still. I have been in rooms like that for years. Rooms where decisions get made quickly, where tone matters more than truth, where the hierarchy dictates whose words hold weight. But this was fundamentally different. I did not feel ignored. I felt dismissed. There is a profound difference between the two. Ignored means they simply forgot or overlooked you. Dismissed means they actively decided you do not matter in the grand scheme of their operations. I glanced at the human resources representative for a fleeting second. She did not meet my eyes. She just kept writing in her leather-bound notebook like this was entirely normal. And maybe to them, in their corporate bubble, it was. 15 years of my life, my loyalty, my late nights, and my exit was just an inconvenience to schedule later. Richard kept talking about the rollout. It was a major client integration, arguably the biggest in the history of the firm. High visibility, big numbers that would make his quarterly bonus skyrocket. He spoke with an unnerving confidence, acting like everything was already under control. I knew it was not, but I did not say anything. Not yet. I just nodded when my name came up. I took notes just to maintain the illusion. I played the part I have played for over a decade, reliable, quiet, always there when things inevitably break. At one point, he looked directly at me and said, "We need you focused this week." That word again. That was entirely unnecessary. It almost sounded like a semblance of respect, but it was not. It was raw expectation without any genuine acknowledgement of my humanity or my contributions. I had written that resignation very carefully the night before. I made sure it was clear, professional, and completely stripped of any emotion. I gave him 2 weeks' notice, even though I technically did not have to according to my contract. I thought it would start a conversation, maybe an exit interview, or at least a handshake. Instead, it got pushed aside like it was a minor annoyance. The meeting went on for another agonizing 20 minutes. Numbers were thrown around. Timelines were compressed. Risk levels were assessed with a horrifying lack of technical understanding. Most of it was built on assumptions I knew were fundamentally flawed, and still, no one mentioned my email again. When it finally ended, chairs slid back on the carpet. People stood up, adjusting their ties and skirts. Papers shuffled into neat stacks. Richard gave me a quick, dismissive nod like absolutely nothing unusual had happened. "Let us stay tight on this," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the glass room. That was it. I walked out of that room with the same stoic calm I have carried through much worse situations. But something had irrevocably shifted inside me. It was not anger. It was not even frustration. It was just pure, unadulterated clarity. They did not think I would actually leave. To them, I was just a cog, a part of the system, something stable, something permanent, something they simply did not have to think about or maintain. And that was the exact moment I realized something incredibly simple. If they did not take my life decisions seriously, then maybe it was high time I stopped taking their precious system personally. Because for 15 long, grueling years, I had been the sole architect holding it all together. And for the very first time, I started wondering what would actually happen if I stopped. When I first joined the company, the system did not work at all. not in any real functional sense. Orders were constantly delayed, shipments got lost in the void. Clients called every single day asking for updates that no one could accurately provide. The whole operation ran on desperate patches and wild guesswork. I was 35 back then. Not too young, not too old. Just experienced enough to see exactly what was broken and stubborn enough to believe I could fix it. They brought me in as a senior operations analyst. The title sounded clean and prestigious. The reality was a nightmare. My very first month, I worked 3 straight weekends, fueled by nothing but stale coffee and determination, trying to trace a phantom routing failure that kept sending expensive shipments to the wrong distribution centers across the country. No one in the information technology department knew why it was happening. By the end of the 4th weekend, I finally figured it out. It was a tiny, insidious logic conflict buried deep within the legacy code of the system. One single line of code that had been haphazardly copied and adjusted far too many times over the previous years by developers who had long since left the company. I rewrote the logic. I fixed it. Almost immediately, the shipment stabilized. There was no grand announcement, no award, no real recognition from upper management. There were just fewer angry calls from our biggest clients. That is exactly how it started. Over time, the problems predictably got bigger. The systems grew immensely more complex. The clients demanded far more precision and faster turnaround times. And somehow, organically, I became the person everyone called when something critical broke. Middle of the night, weekends, holidays, it truly did not matter. If it was critical, the escalation path ended at my desk. I did not complain, at least not in the early years. I naively saw it as a sign of deep trust. And to be perfectly fair, I built something incredibly real out of that trust. Piece by painstaking piece, I completely redesigned the fundamental way the system handled complex routing, real-time tracking, and comprehensive reporting. I coded and deployed internal tools on my own time so that the various teams could actually see a visual representation of what was happening instead of guessing blindly. I meticulously documented intricate processes that no one had ever bothered to write down before. Eventually, we were no longer just reacting to fires. We were running a robust, proactive system that actually worked. At its absolute peak, this system handled tens of thousands of transactions every single day. It spanned multiple geographical regions. It served our highest value clients flawlessly. And the vast majority of it ran on architectural structures that I personally designed and built. I was not alone, of course. There were teams of developers and operations staff, good, hard-working people. But when a critical, system-threatening event occurred, they all still inevitably looked in my direction for the ultimate solution. I genuinely helped them succeed and look good in front of the board. I did not mind it at first. But over a prolonged period of time, you slowly start to notice the unmistakable patterns. Promotions that conveniently skip over you because you are deemed too essential in your current role. Strategic decisions made about the system without anyone bothering to ask for your technical input. Credit that steadily moves upward through the ranks, even when the actual labor did not. I remember one specific year in vivid detail. I had just finished stabilizing a massive client integration that was teetering on the absolute edge of catastrophic failure. We were literally hours away from losing a multi-million-dollar account. I stayed up all night, writing custom scripts and patching the data flow. By early morning, the system was finally running clean and green. Later that same week, executive leadership sent out a glowing, company-wide email celebrating the monumentally successful transition. My name was completely absent from that email. I read that email twice, scanning every line just to be absolutely sure. It did not completely surprise me, but the sting of it stayed with me for a long time. Over the passing years, the workload never slowed down. If anything, it only got heavier and more demanding. Late nights in the office became the standard normal. Weekends became optional in name only. If you wanted the system to survive, you logged on. I missed countless birthdays, quiet family dinners, and small, irreplicable moments that simply do not come back. My wife eventually stopped asking when I would be home. She just started planning her life and meals around my absence. I constantly told myself it was only temporary. I convinced myself that once things finally stabilized, it would eventually ease up. But enterprise systems like that do not ever stay still. They constantly grow. They continually demand more resources, more attention. And so did the company. The only thing that absolutely did not grow was how they perceived my value. Reliable, definitely. Important, perhaps. Replaceable, absolutely. That is exactly what they deeply believed. And sitting in that sterile glass meeting room earlier, watching my formal resignation get brushed aside like a stray piece of lint, I finally realized something I really should have seen years ago. They did not ignore my email because they did not read it. They ignored it because they truly did not think it mattered. Because for 15 long years, I had made absolute sure that things worked flawlessly, no matter what the cost was to me personally. And when you do that consistently for long enough, people stop seeing the immense effort behind the curtain. They only see the polished result. They foolishly assume it will always just effortlessly be there. What they fundamentally did not understand was just how much of that intricate system depended heavily on things they could not even see. Things I never needed to explicitly explain to them. Things I always just quietly handled in the background until now. The company did not fall apart overnight. Decline is rarely that dramatic in the corporate world. It changed very slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. One strategic leadership hire at a time. The new boss, Richard Caldwell, came in about 3 years before that fateful morning meeting. He had a very clean, impressive background. He possessed a remarkably strong track record on paper. He was exactly the kind of person corporate boards inherently trust because everything always looks incredibly structured and perfectly aligned around him. About a year later, Richard brought in his hand-picked new vice president of operations. His name was Nolan Reed. Nolan was in his early 30s. He held a Master of Business Administration from a prestigious university. He was polished, well-spoken, and confident in a specific way that only comes from working in mature systems that are already perfectly stable. Nolan thoroughly understood metrics and reports. He did not, however, understand how the complex data in those reports was actually generated or built. At first, I genuinely thought it would be a relatively normal leadership transition. New leadership always needs an adjustment period to learn the granular details. I have seen it happen many times before, so I did exactly what I always do. I helped. I spent hours walking Nolan through the labyrinthine architecture of the system. I visually showed him exactly how the critical data flowed from input to output. I carefully explained where the infrastructure was solidly built and where it was dangerously fragile. He politely listened. He took copious notes on his expensive tablet. He even asked a few of the right surface-level questions. But after a few short months, something within the dynamic shifted noticeably. Our meetings became drastically shorter. The conversations became almost entirely about optimizing numbers and margins, and significantly less about the operational context or technical debt. Polished slide decks completely replaced meaningful technical discussions, and very slowly, critical operational decisions started getting made without ever consulting the people who actually built and ran the underlying system. I started noticing this shift in very small, subtle ways at first. Urgent emails I sent warning about impending system risks would receive a simple, automated-sounding reply. Noted. There was never any follow-up. There were no clarifying questions, just that one dismissive word, noted. In departmental meetings, I would attempt to thoroughly explain a potential looming issue. I would describe something very specific, a pattern I had seen before that preceded a crash, and the room would go uncomfortably quiet for a long second. Then someone, usually Nolan, would smoothly bring up a colorful chart that definitively stated everything was currently within an acceptable green range. And that would be the absolute end of the discussion. It was not simply that they thought my analysis was wrong. It was something far worse than that. They genuinely thought the heavily sanitized data they were looking at told the complete, infallible story, something that unequivocally did not need maintenance or attention. Something that would always just be there, doing the heavy lifting no matter what. And for the very first time in 15 years, I started seriously asking myself what would actually happen if that foundational assumption was no longer true. I went back to my quiet office after that morning meeting and firmly closed the door. I took no calls. I answered no messages. It was just quiet. My dual computer monitors were still open from the long night before. My resignation email still sat there prominently in my sent folder. It was time-stamped, clear, and very direct. I read it again. I had given 2 weeks' notice. The tone was perfectly professional. There was absolutely no emotion, no bitterness. Just plain facts. After 15 years of dedicated service, I genuinely thought that email would at least start a basic conversation. Instead, it got aggressively pushed aside like it did not even exist. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and stared blankly at the bright screen for a long while. I was not angry. I was not even frustrated anymore. I was just profoundly, completely done. For years, I had been the sole person who aggressively made sure things did not break. If there was a potential risk, I flagged it weeks early. If something started subtly going wrong, I stepped in immediately before the corruption spread. If leadership made a wildly optimistic decision that did not match technical reality, I spent my weekends adjusting things quietly in the background to magically make it work anyway. I never did it for the glory or the recognition. I did it simply because I strongly believe in doing the job right, because I took immense personal pride in what I had built. But sitting there in the quiet that morning, something finally became very clear. They did not see or value any of that unseen labor. To them, the system just magically worked. And if it worked, they believed it did not need protecting or investing in. That realization was the ultimate shift. It was not a massive, dramatic decision. It was not a cinematic moment of revelation. It was just a simple, profound line in the sand that I stopped crossing. I was not going to go 1 inch beyond my strict job description anymore. If a critical flaw was officially documented as a risk, that was enough. If they actively chose to ignore it, I was not going to frantically chase them down the hallway to beg them to listen. If a cascading issue started building quietly, I was not going to heroically jump in early unless I was explicitly and directly asked to do so by management. For 15 long years, I had been silently closing dangerous gaps they did not even know existed. That exact day, I simply stopped. I methodically went through my assigned tasks for the massive rollout they were relentlessly pushing. Absolutely everything was neatly outlined in their project management software. Everything had incredibly tight, unrealistic timelines. There was one specific critical module I had explicitly flagged the week before. It was a legacy routing dependency inextricably tied to the new high-volume client. I had already written a very detailed technical note. It contained a crystal-clear explanation of the underlying mechanics. It explicitly labeled it as a severe potential failure point under load. No one from leadership had followed up. Normally, in the past, I would have obsessively tested it again myself, quietly added extra redundant safeguards, and maybe even secretly patched the underlying logic to completely avoid the risk. This time, I deliberately left it exactly as it was. It was fully documented, completely visible in the risk register, and entirely untouched by my hands. Around 6:30 in the evening, I deliberately shut down my workstation. That simple act might not sound like much to an outsider, but for me, it was monumental. It was the absolute first time in years I had logged off for the day without neurotically checking every single server status twice, without carefully setting custom alerts on my phone, without mentally preparing for an inevitable emergency call in the middle of the night. I slowly packed my leather bag, turned off the fluorescent office lights, and calmly walked out of the corporate building. There was no rush. There was no hesitation. It felt like just a normal, healthy end to the day. On the long drive home, my phone remained completely quiet. There were no urgent, frantic calls. There were no panicked text messages asking for immediate help. On their pristine dashboards, everything looked perfectly stable. And that is the terrifying thing about complex, interconnected systems like that. They always look flawlessly stable right before they are catastrophically not. I got home, had a quiet dinner with my wife, and sat down on the couch like a normal human being, having a normal evening. For the first time in a very long time, I was not actively worrying about what fragile component might break overnight. I already knew exactly what was going to break. I just was not going to be the invisible safety net preventing it this time. Because if they honestly did not think my carefully considered decision to leave mattered, there was finally time for them to see exactly what their precious system looked like without me constantly holding its fraying edges together. People who do not build systems think they are solid because they do not physically see them move. They see beautifully designed dashboards, rising numbers, and comforting green indicators. They falsely assume that means everything underneath is structurally sound and built on bedrock. But most enterprise systems, real systems, the kind that handle immense pressure, massive data volume, and millions of dollars, they are absolutely not clean. The deadlines remain suffocatingly tight. It was exactly the kind of relentless operational pressure that mercilessly exposes hidden weak points. I watched the initial stages of it from a safe distance. Automated emails came through confirming the system readiness. Project managers sent out glowing status updates. Executive leadership gave their final, confident approvals. Everything looked remarkably clean. Everyone sounded incredibly confident. Normally, I would have immediately stepped in. I would have run rigorous extra load tests, monitored the fragile routing layer obsessively, and maybe manually adjusted the timing parameters just enough to safely avoid the risk. It honestly would not have taken much effort on my part. That is the part most non-technical people do not ever understand. Preventing massive failure is often very small, unglamorous work. It is quiet, invisible work, but you absolutely have to intimately know exactly where to look. This time, I did not touch a single line of code. I simply read the cheerful updates, but I also saw the subtle, ominous signs in the raw logs. A very slight, almost imperceptible delay in transaction processing times. A minor, easily dismissed inconsistency in the secondary routing logs. It was nothing big enough to trigger their automated alarms. But it was more than enough to tell me, with absolute certainty, that the system was beginning to severely strain under the new weight. I calmly closed the monitoring dashboard. It was not because I did not care about the company anymore, but because I had already responsibly done my part. The severe risk was officially documented, the executive decision had been confidently made, and for the very first time in 15 years, I let the system run exactly as it was, naked and vulnerable. I applied no manual adjustments. I implemented no silent midnight fixes. I provided no extra layer of invisible protection. The massive rollout went fully live late in the evening. By all official high-level measures, it was a resounding, unmitigated success. Exuberant messages went out congratulating the entire team on a flawless launch. Leadership looked brilliant. The revenue numbers held strong, at least on the polished surface. I quietly turned off my computer screen and left it there, because I knew a terrifying truth that they did not. System stability is absolutely not about how things look when they first start. It is entirely about how they hold up under sustained, relentless pressure, and that kind of pressure does not show its devastating effects right away. It builds up quietly, invisibly, until one tiny critical part finally gives way. And when that inevitable happens, the failure does not stay neatly contained. It spreads like a virus. I had seen it happen before, more than once. And this time, I was not bravely standing in front of the collapsing wave to stop it. I was intentionally standing far back, just waiting. I woke up abruptly to the violent sound of my phone vibrating relentlessly on the wooden nightstand. It was not a single phone call. It was a continuous stream of multiple urgent alerts. I did not even bother to check the time right away. I absolutely did not need to check. I knew exactly what it meant. When fragile systems fail like that, they politely do not wait for standard business hours. They violently break exactly when the systemic load is at its absolute highest. I slowly reached over in the dark, picked up the bright phone, and looked at the glaring screen. It was 2:47 in the morning, right on schedule. The urgent notifications were stacked dozens deep. Critical system alerts, massive error reports, frantic missed calls. The fragile legacy routing layer had officially started failing. It was not failing loudly. It was not failing all at once in a catastrophic crash. It was failing exactly the insidious way I had explicitly described in my ignored warnings. Thousands of transactions were still being actively processed, but they were being silently sent to the completely wrong data paths. At first glance, to an untrained eye, it probably looked like a few small, negligible inconsistencies. But then those tiny inconsistencies started to rapidly multiply exponentially. I sat there in bed for a few long seconds, just quietly reading the incoming data. I was not rushing to my laptop. I was not emotionally reacting. I was just coldly observing the inevitable reality unfold. Another blaring alert came in. Then another. The cascading failure was not stopping. It was rapidly spreading. Complex downstream systems were now starting to unknowingly pick up the corrupted, bad data. Physical warehouse inventory counts were wildly going off track. Massive national shipment schedules were completely misaligned. Crucial client dashboards were suddenly showing completely conflicting, nonsensical information. This specific phase is the terrifying part most people never actually get to see. The precise silent moment when a massive system irrevocably shifts from marginally stable to completely unstable. It is rarely dramatic at first. It is deadly quiet. But if you truly know what you are looking at, you can clearly see exactly where the devastation is heading. And I did. I had seen this exact pattern before, and I knew exactly how to stop it. There were very specific, highly technical steps. You had to manually adjust the routing parameters in real time. You had to quickly isolate the severely affected data queues. You had to carefully reprocess certain critical transactions before they moved too far downstream and corrupted everything else. It was absolutely not a simple process, but it was entirely manageable if you acted very early. That is exactly what I had always unfailingly done. Act early, contain the fire before it spread to the forest. I looked at the glowing screen again. There were even more missed calls now. The night operations team, the panicked on-call junior engineers, then a direct text message from Nolan Reed. "Julian, we are seeing some very strange anomalies. Can you please check immediately?" I did not respond. Not immediately. I calmly set the phone back down on the nightstand. I sat there in the dark bedroom and just listened to the absolute silence in the room. For 15 long years, this was the exact moment I would predictably get up without even thinking about it. Name your price. There was no dismissal. There was no delay. Just direct, desperate acknowledgement of reality. I did not rush to answer him. I let the heavy moment sit for a long, agonizing second. Then I said, "I can gladly help verbally outline the necessary recovery steps for your team." Another long pause. And after that he asked, the fear evident. That was the real, underlying question. It was not about the broken system anymore. It was entirely about me and my leverage. "My formal resignation still stands exactly as written," I said. Clear, simple, absolutely no emotion attached. He did not even try to push back. He did not try to arrogantly convince me to stay. At least not yet. Because he finally understood something profound now that he had completely missed before. This was absolutely not a discussion he controlled anymore. He was entirely at my mercy. I methodically walked them through the grueling recovery process over the phone. Step by agonizing step. Isolate the corrupted routing queues. Halt any further transaction flow through the failing module immediately. Identify and painstakingly flag every single corrupted data entry. Begin the slow, controlled reprocessing of millions of records. It was not going to be fast. It was not going to be clean, but it was the absolute only way forward out of the mess they created. As I spoke, I could hear the desperate shift in the war room on their side. Less chaotic noise, more terrified focus. The kind of absolute attention that only comes when there is absolutely no room left for arrogant assumptions. When the long call finally ended, I calmly closed my laptop. Not because everything was magically fixed, but because my contractual role in it was officially done. For 15 years, I had been the loyal person who stayed up all night until everything was perfect and stable again. This time, I gave them exactly what they legally needed and not 1 ounce more. No extra unpaid hours, no silent, heroic corrections, no stepping back into a toxic system that had already decided my career did not matter. Around noon, I sent one final, highly documented email. It was short and ruthlessly professional. I firmly confirmed my resignation. I reinstated my absolute last working day. I offered extremely limited transition support, strictly within defined, legally binding boundaries, referencing the copyright limitations, and that was absolutely it. There was no long, dramatic explanation, no emotional outburst, just cold, hard closure. Later that afternoon, I got a frantic message from the head of human resources. This time, they desperately wanted to schedule an immediate conversation to discuss a massive retention package. Now they were finally ready to talk. But timing matters immensely in life and business. And sometimes, timing is the only thing you absolutely do not get to fix after the fact. I permanently shut down my home system connection, packed my personal belongings into a box, and walked out of the building in my mind one last time. They did not ignore my resignation because it was not clear. They ignored it because they arrogantly thought it did not matter. By morning, they knew exactly how much it did. And I did not have to prove a single thing. Their broken system did that for me.